we've asked everyone to join us today to learn more about the guide that we're going to go through today and the process that brought it together. So just to speak to that process for a moment, the guide was drafted by the On-Screen Manitoba Producer Committee, and that was due to some really great and forward-thinking research that a number of production companies put together. This draft was then shared with the Manitoba Media Production Industry Working Group, and you'll have a moment to meet all of these people in a second. And there was feedback that came from that group that contributed to the creation of this guide. And since that time, we've also had feedback from Safe Work Manitoba. And of course, we have integrated the Government of Manitoba guidelines that were published last week. So this guide is a framework for us to move forward with production startup. It's a document that will evolve over time. One thing that we have learned in the COVID-19 period is that it is a moving target, and there will be updates from Manitoba Health as we move forward, and On-Screen Manitoba will constantly update the guide from that perspective. We are also continuing to follow emerging industry standards, and we will be updating the guide from that perspective as well. And we will share that information through our newsletter, with our membership, and on our website, of course. So it's really important to us moving forward that we continue to work in this very collaborative fashion that has been the basis for this guide. And this is about all of the stakeholders, including those of you who work directly on set or in production offices. It's about all of us coming together to find the best way forward so that we can return to work safely. So I will also just add one point, and that's that On-Screen Manitoba and Film Training Manitoba have been working very closely in the last few days, meeting with stakeholders and beginning to develop a training plan so that we can ensure that everybody has access to the training and information that they need moving forward, and as we continue to develop the media production industry in Manitoba. So I would just like to close by saying thank you to everybody who contributed to this guide, and thank you to everybody for being here today. I look forward to the presentation, and I look forward to the questions and discussion and the work that we have before us for the coming weeks and months. And I'm going to hand this back over to Monique, who is co-chair of the Manitoba Media Production Industry Working Group, and who will be our moderator today.
Lucky, lucky people. Okay, so as Nicole said, my name is Monique Perot, and I am co-chair with Nicole of the Manitoba Media Production Industry Group. Everybody is on a timer today, including myself, but I'm going to take care of some housekeeping notes very quickly. If your video or your sound is on, please turn them off if you are not speaking. It'll just help everybody's home internet, and especially from people as far away as Gimli who are on the call today. Basically, I want to let you know, in case you don't already know, On-Screen Manitoba is the Media Production Industry Association, and there are industry associations. There are producers, service suppliers, our unions, and our crew. All of the information, if you're already a member, that you've been receiving is information that is being gathered on a local, national, and international level. Membership is really, really important to this group. And because all the information is in one place, I really encourage you to take a look at some of the membership opportunities for On-Screen. I promise this really is not like a long infomercial, but it's something for everybody, and everything that we're talking about today is very liquid. It changes like practically daily, so you will have the most up-to-date and current information from On-Screen. So with that said, I have the great honor of introducing some of our members of the Manitoba Media Work Group, and we will start off with Rachel Rusin. You have 1 minute, and I have a timer.
Perfect. Thank you, Monique and Nicole. I want to thank the producer committee who really worked hard to develop these health and safety protocols that were submitted to government to put forward the minimum health and safety standards for the resurgence of our industry. That was a big collaborative effort. They worked very hard at that, and we worked together as a group at our industry to have those discussions, and so thank you for doing that. And then thank you to Screen Manitoba and the producer committee again for putting together this safety and health guide. Never before has collaboration been so important in our industry. And I'm so pleased at how well everybody's been working together and putting everything they have into making sure that when we opened our doors again, we did so safely, responsibly, and with as much communication and transparency as possible. And so I'm very pleased to have so many of you join on screen on this today, and I'm pleased to be here for Manitoba Film and Music. And again, as Nicole said, it's a dynamic situation and we'll continue to collaborate, and I just wish you all good luck and good health as we emerge again.
Thank you, Rachel. Very well done. Next up on my list is Melissa Cadence, who, along with Rachel, because Rachel has been new to the position, is also new. She replaces Rob Kennedy, and I'll give her a minute to speak.
Thank you, Monique. I'm delighted to be here today and want to reiterate what Rachel said about the committee that worked so hard to pull this together in such a short time. So, big shout out to, Kyle, Lesley, Merritt, all of your work on the OSM Producers Committee. It was a huge task, and you really did deliver. And also a shout out to everybody here today who's here to listen to what we have to say, what Kyle and the team has to say. And this is going to be tough moving forward. It's going to be, but we're going to get this right, and we have to get it right. But we'll all work together, and we will be able to see this through. And it won't be long before some of these guidelines feel like second nature to everybody. So again, happy to be here, and thanks to everybody involved. And just wanted to let you know that I have to dip out at 5:15, so I'll just miss the last few minutes of this. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Melissa. I would like to introduce Kenny Boyce from the City of Winnipeg, Manager of Film and Special Events. Kenny?
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. It's nice to see a whole bunch of faces I haven't seen for a very long time, it seems, and a lot of names on the screen. I also would like to echo the comments from Nicole and from Rachel Rusin in regards to the hard work of the Producers Committee and to the unions and guilds, and to our counterparts, Melissa over at the provincial government. Monique, I get to work with Monique Perot every day. I'm a very lucky guy. And for all of you that know the work that she has done in the last little while, and our office trying to unite the community, I feel that we'll be back very soon telling not only our stories and Manitoba stories, Canadian stories, and servicing visiting productions. It's the best and safest way to do so. A lot of work has come into the document you're going to see and we're going to review today. And the film office has not even closed one day during this pandemic. We're here to answer your questions and your concerns, and I encourage you at any time, if you ever need help or we can assist in any way in making the way that you ply your trade an easier day, call upon us anytime. So on behalf of the mayor and the members of council and all the great partners we have at the city, we can't wait to see you all again one day soon. Thank you so much.
Just a little bit over, but that's okay. Rob Rowan, do we have Rob?
No, Rob could not make the call.
Okay, well then I would, did you want to say a few words, Nico?
Sure. Can you see me? Hi, as many of you may know, my name is Nicholas Phillips. I'm president of Local 856, the Motion Picture Technicians. And we have participated in advisory role on this guide, and we're happy to see it there, and we see it as a clear first step to getting us back onto set safely. We all are aware that these guides are a changing thing, and they will evolve and develop, and we look forward to putting them into place. That's about it.
Thank you, Nico. I would like to introduce Gary Nelson first and Stephen Foster to the group from the DGC.
Thank you, Monique, and hello all. It's great to get together with probably the largest group of film people ever in Manitoba. On behalf of Manitoba District Council Chair Kathy Edgar and the Guild itself, I'd like to thank On Screen and its producer caucus for their quick, thoughtful leadership, working with us and other partners across the industry to put together this guide. I applaud those producers who've shown the wisdom to sign on to and abide by these guidelines as our industry restarts. We're excited and eager to get back to work, but we know we have to do so safely above all else. The early buy-in that these safety measures provide is certainly encouraging, and the DGC will be encouraging all of its signatory productions to also sign on to these protocols. The way production restarts in Manitoba could have impacts felt far beyond the province of Manitoba, as all eyes from across Canada and even internationally are going to be watching how production reopens in Manitoba. David Forget, the DGC's National Executive Director, was recently quoted in the Hollywood Reporter on Manitoba's reopening. He said, "The first productions to start back up in Winnipeg will have a tremendous responsibility to uphold the highest standards of health and safety and not jeopardize the return to work for the entire industry." This guide is a good first step, but there's still work to be done as production starts again in Manitoba. We look forward to the continued collaborative spirit that has been demonstrated by all in this great industry. I'm confident that together we will be successful in this challenge. Thank you, and I look forward to the dialogue today and further discussions with the general community and DGC members in general.
Thank you, Gary. Was that just DGC's statement as a whole?
Yes, but I think we should invite Stephen to say something.
Sorry. Okay, Stephen, you can say something.
I'll be quick, I promise. Just want to say thank you again for joining us today. We welcome this guide as we work together in collaboration to restart our media production industry. Thank you to On Screen Manitoba and Producers Committee, as well as our partners at IATSE, ACTRA, Manitoba Film Liaison, City of Winnipeg, Arts Branch, and Film Trading Manitoba for their contributions, collaborations, and commitment as we work to establish the highest standards of health and safety in our industry. Our goal is not just to restart, but to remain sustainable. Thank you. I look forward to today's discussion.
Thank you, Stephen. I would like to introduce Rob McClendon from ACTRA. Unmute.
I'm unmuted now?
Yes, sir, Bob.
Hi. On behalf of ACTRA Manitoba, I'd like to welcome everybody who's participating in today's conference. It's fantastic that so many people have registered for this. This is the first, I guess, Zoom conference on this topic, and it is vitally important. I am so glad so many people have registered. I want to thank the Producers Committee for working so hard on this, and I really appreciate their efforts. And I think I'm going to leave it at that. I hope everybody finds this very informative and is a great start. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. I would like to introduce Adam Smolik, who's the Managing Director for Film Training Manitoba. Unmute.
Sorry, Adam, I think you were just reconnecting right as you were getting introduced, so maybe you missed that piece.
Go ahead, Adam. Hello? Unmute. Kelly, what's going on?
I'm not sure.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yep, here we
there
go.
you are. Yep.
Sorry guys, I have two computers and one of my computers has gone down. So I'm on a second computer, but I just wanted to say that Film Training Manitoba is very pleased to partner on this session together. And I want everyone to know I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces. It's been a very good process here, collaborative among all the partners. And I do want to thank Lesley, Kyle, and Monique for stepping forward and running us through this process. And I do want to thank OnScreen for all of their efforts working to collaborate this or calibrate this session. And of course, we're going to be launching some training in the next number of weeks. And we're certainly looking forward to that being a collaborative process as well. And thanks again, everyone.
Thank you very much, Adam. I would very much like to introduce Mr. Jack Slusser, and he is from a prevention consultant from Safe Work Manitoba, and we'll get him to say a few words.
Okay, thank you, Monique. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jack Slusser, and I'm a prevention consultant with Safe Work Manitoba. That's a division of WCB and the public agency that dedicated to the prevention of workplace injury and illness. So we work with partners in the safety community. We provide prevention, education, consulting services. That's our role. I was previously a safety and health officer for the province of Manitoba's workplace safety and health branch before I was transferred over in 2014 along with 7 of my colleagues to help create Safe Work Manitoba. So while we're the prevention entity, Workplace Safety and Health Branch is the part of the province of Manitoba's Department of Finance, and their role is to enforce Workplace Safety and Health Act and regulations in order to ensure Manitoba's workplace are safe and healthy. So our role, we train, we provide consultations, risk assessments, etc. So just wanted to make sure that distinction was clear. I've been working with many of Manitoba's media production industry stakeholders since 2015. When along with my former colleague Darren James of the Workplace Safety and Health Branch, we assisted in the revisions of the safety and health guidelines for Manitoba media production industry, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Since that time, I've continued to collaborate with these same stakeholders that many of them just introduced themselves to you, to provide guidance on the implementation of Manitoba's workplace safety and health legislation into your very unique and very fluid workplaces. Some of these collaborations I just want to mention include working with Adam and his team at Film Training Manitoba to provide feedback on their in-person and online courses and resources. This is work that's still continuing, it's ongoing. Meetings with IATSE's Rob and Terrence over the last couple of years to raise awareness of workplace safety and health requirements with their members. Providing OnScreen Manitoba's producer committee with feedback on today's COVID-19 health and safety guide. And once the COVID-19 concerns have been dealt with to everyone's satisfaction, I'll be making myself available to help with revising the safety and health guidelines to include the most recent amendments to the Workplace Safety and Health Act and regulations. I wonder if I said legislation enough there. In closing, I just want to thank the MPI working group for including me in today's meeting, and I look forward to the discussions over the next hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. Appreciate it. Next, I would like to introduce the OnScreen Manitoba Producer Committee co-chairs. Did Lesley Mayer get in? And Chris MacGyver, I did see.
Yes, hello. I am Chris MacGyver, and Lesley is, I saw her on here. She'll be joining. We should see her picture shortly. We just want to say thank you mainly to our entire producers group. It was a hard run in a very short time to try to put some of these protocols together. And I think we've come up with a plan here that can work for everybody and make everybody safe. That's obviously our main goal. I just do want to point out a few people in particular, Doug Darling, Merritt Jensen-Carr, Juliet Hagopian, and Kyle Irving from Eagle Vision, all put in sort of their own company's guidelines that we could all work off of as a starting point to come up with this full document that you'll be seeing later today or this afternoon, hopefully soon. And Kyle will walk you through. Lesley, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I just want to say thanks to the committee. Everyone's worked incredibly hard, and I just want to say that our guiding principle through the entire thing has been that safety of everyone has been at the forefront of everything that we've talked about and all the conversations we've had. I also want to thank the unions and the Manitoba Production Industry Working Group for their very valuable input in putting this together. And particularly the people who did work so hard at drafting, you know, the initial ideas and protocols that we're basing today's document on. So
Wonderful.
I think that's about it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lesley. Were you done, Chris?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to add, because we keep throwing the term Manitoba Media Production Industry Work Group around, and I haven't really explained what that is. That is a group that myself and Nicole Maciation from On Screen Manitoba co-chair, that was originally started, that included the unions, Film Training Manitoba, Manitoba Film and Music. Oops, that's not my shut up bell, that was Chris's. And who did I forget? The province, Melissa Capist, to try to address some of the more pressing issues in the film industry. And we came out with the Manitoba Code of Conduct, which I have been seeing around people's production offices and on production. And if you don't see it, ask your production about it. So we've received many, I'm going to start reading now, so I apologize. We've received many questions from the registration forms, and presenters will do their best to address them within their presentation. There'll be a 20-minute question period at the end if you want to put your questions into the chat function at the bottom. We may not get to all your questions, but we'll absolutely do our best. And please, if you've already submitted a question, don't retype it into this. We've got a whole list of stuff that we were trying to make sure that we were addressing. We have a large group of people, so please help keep the chat manageable by only entering questions and only entering your question one time, as I just said. On Screen, we'll endeavor to send out a follow-up email either tomorrow or early next week, and they will try and address any other questions that we're not able to get through by the end of the session. Just as a note, this session is, I don't know why I can't say session, I apologize, will be recorded. We're hoping to have the video uploaded and ready to go out with the email. And again, as I said, membership has its privileges, but of course, the guidelines will be available to all on Screen Manitoba. And I think we get to start with the presentation. So I am very happily going to introduce Kyle Irving, the partner at Eagle Vision, and Lesley Oswald, production manager, to talk about what everybody has been working so very hard on. Thank you.
Lesley, look at that. That's us.
That's us.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending this session and for your patience generally, I think, in anticipation of it, because I think a lot of people for a long time have had a lot of questions about how all of this is going to work and how we're going to get back together on set in a safe way. And I think everyone's identified how it is of paramount importance that we get this right. We will only get one chance. We don't want to lead and fail. We want to lead and succeed. And so just to give a little backstory on this document, it's been referenced that several of the local producers were working on guidelines and protocols to get to this point and contributed to this document. And I would like to make a special mention to the team at Eagle Vision who 6 weeks ago started working on our contribution to this. Renata, Hannah, Tyson, Lesley, Richard, and Dr. Jane Griffith all worked tirelessly over the last 6 weeks to interview and poll crew members from our community, to search the globe for best practices, to compare and contrast what was working, what wasn't, and to really assemble a document that helped become foundational in the creation of these guidelines for our provincial industry. So thanks so much to them for their contribution. And Miriam, if we could get on to the next slide. I think it's important to know that these guidelines apply to everyone. No matter what your job is on set, whether you're a member of the union, if you're a member of a contracting group, even if you're a guest or visitor of the set, these guidelines are going to apply to everybody. It applies on set, on location, in the production office, in the carp shop, everywhere. We need to be able to count on each other and hold each other accountable to follow these guidelines and maintain the best practices both on and off set. You know, the way that I like to best describe it is, you know, we need to treat our film family the same way we would our own family. We need to be mindful of them and considerate of them when we conduct ourselves both at work and away from work, so that we do everything we can to honor the guidelines and the recommendations to keep us all safe. This document speaks to the best practices that we've identified to this point for maintaining a safe working environment, and provides the recommendations and best practices to help employers, employees, contractors, and others to ensure that those protocols are handled properly and clearly understood. The health guidelines required by the Manitoba government regulations are included as a minimum in this document, but this document also is an enhanced version of those guidelines. It is actually a version of the document that was presented to government and that government used to create the minimum guidelines that they've provided to everyone. But you will note that there are 7 production companies so far locally who have all taken an undertaking or a pledge to ensure that on our productions, these guidelines, this standard will be the minimum. And we encourage all Manitoba production companies to join us. If you'd like to join on, to sign on and become part of this pledge, please reach out to On Screen Manitoba and we will add you to it. And you will be named as one of the Manitoba production companies committed to this level of health and safety. The spirit and intent of these guidelines is to ensure that all productions have a consistent standard set of principles so that crew has a level of comfort knowing things will be fundamentally the same from one show to the next. That's at the heart of this. It's up to all of us to make it happen in a safe way. Lesley?
So I'm tasked to do the presentation of the nuts and bolts of what this document is. So general guidelines we're going to talk about. Kyle's going to talk about some employer responsibilities. What do you do before you go to work? We're going to talk about some specific requirements and adapting the workday to accommodate COVID-19. And as Kyle said, the Manitoba production companies who have signed this, the last page of this is their signatures on this document. So Mary, if you can, so some general guidelines. As we know, we're all dealing with, have been dealing with COVID for a couple of months now, and we know that physical distancing is an important aspect of keeping safe, as is hygiene, cleaning, and what we do if we have to travel outside the province. So physical distancing. So we have to ensure that we are at least 2 meters apart whenever reasonably possible. That's the standard. That's easy when you put the 2 lawn chairs in the backyard and you measure the distance and you have your friend come over, but it isn't as easy on a film set. So I think each one of us will need to be very conscious of what 6 feet looks like, what that 2 meters looks like. And be conscious of making sure that when possible, we are that 6 feet apart. When physical distancing cannot be maintained, appropriate steps should be taken. One of those steps is wearing a non-medical mask, which enhances by 80% your chances of not getting COVID virus. limit the number of face-to-face interactions. In prep, that'll be doing a lot of what we normally do face-to-face by this method, by Zooming, or by doing location surveys with the designer holding his computer up to show the director who's isolated in his hotel room for 14 days, possibly, if he's come from out of province, what's coming up. So use outdoor locations when possible. Limit your interactions with general public when you're out on the streets. And if you are interacting with general public, wear a mask. Implement online platforms for all paperwork, something I know the accountants are working on hard, trying to find platforms that will work for us, for deal memos, for petty cash, for everything that we do. It's possible now to do electronically. Maintain a single point of entry and discourage people from leaving and re-entering. Every time you go out and come back, there's hand washing and everything has to happen all over again. So once you're in the position where you know you need to work for several hours, just stay there. Discourage the congregation of people through posters. Posters are going to be everywhere, just to remind everybody about social distancing, about washing your hands, etc. Floor markings, we're all familiar with those if we go grocery shopping at all. Go one way, stand on these footprints, that type of thing to help everybody keep their distance from each other. Keep the number of people on set and on location and in the production office to a minimum. That on location, we always have a lot of people. In prep, we always have a lot of people in production office. So it's up to every producer to look at their production office and their locations and put these guidelines in this document that's been provided, put these guidelines into place on all of those locations. Hygiene. Again, washing hands is your best bet. Cleaning the equipment you use is your best bet. All of the things that, again, we've been doing with our families for the last 2 months. So washing hands frequently for 20 seconds using warm water or hand sanitizer. Every time you enter or leave the premises, every time you use the washroom, moving into any different kind of place. Try not to touch your face, that's hard. Coughing and sneezing, cough into your elbow, cough into a tissue, then dispose of it quickly. Washrooms. Everybody on the set, the producers can put all of these documents together and think through good practices, but each of us individually need to follow good practices. And washrooms is one of the places. So one person at a time in the washroom. Use the wipes that are going to be provided. Wash down things you touch, including the toilet seat. Be careful of yourself and of the person that's going in next. Sharing of food and personal items should not be permitted. Cleaning. We've all cleaned all our stuff all the time on film sets. Lighting, grip, camera, takes care of their equipment, and now is no different. The employer will provide the space, the materials, everything that's required, but all employees and subjects and contractors should clean and sanitize with Health Canada approved disinfectants that kill viruses, including the coronavirus, on all high touch items and areas. So this would include all your workspaces, all common areas, especially washrooms. It's always about the washrooms. Production equipment, supplies, and high touch objects. So production equipment, camera department needs to keep the camera equipment clean and sterilized and wiped between uses. Same with the lighting, same with the grip, same with the props department. You're handing a prop to a cast person, it needs to have been wiped and you need to be handing it to them safely. Locations need to keep their location equipment clean. Production office needs to keep their production office clean. Individuals must take responsibility to clean personal items such as phones, laptops, or other equipment on a regular basis. Travel. As we know, there is a 14-day isolation restriction in the province of Manitoba. So anybody coming in from outside Manitoba needs to self-isolate for 14 days. So this includes crew. This includes your DP. This includes the director that's coming in. They can sit in their hotel room and do a lot virtually with their prep. And so their 14 days might be filled with very intense Zoom meetings. The actors have to isolate for 14 days. So I think we can be assured they'll know their lines, because I don't know what else you would do in 14 days in a hotel room. Travel during and leading up to the production period should be limited to essential trips only. If you must travel for an essential trip, inform your employer. Any out of province or out of country travel by employees and contractors is subject to the Manitoba required quarantine period. If you go to the lake in Ontario and come back, you need to quarantine for 14 days. Any travel on days off and during production hiatus should be avoided unless you can have that 14 days of quarantine before you need to be on set. Kyle.
Yeah, thanks, Lesley. You know, listening to you talk about all of those things, what rings most true to me is that it becomes an individual responsibility to take care of our own stuff. And I know there's a lot of concern out there about things like, well, when we're going into a location, are we going to have to clean it? I think everyone needs to have some faith in common sense that producers are going to make sure that those kinds of larger cleans and situations like that, where it is not typical of a film crew to look after, the sanitizing of a location before we go in, that will be undertaken outside of our regular work, that will not fall to be the responsibility of a particular department who otherwise wouldn't have done that job. But fundamentally, we need to take care of our own business, especially when it comes to things like bathrooms, our own work area, and the equipment that we rely on and use within our departments. The employer responsibilities, first and foremost, is we have a responsibility to provide a safe workplace for our workers. And we are going to be designated a safety and health representative to any show that has 10 to 19 workers, and a health and safety committee for any show that has a crew of 20 or more workers. Productions with fewer than 10 people working at the same time are encouraged to designate a safety and health representative who's responsible for ensuring the COVID-19 safety health guidelines are met on set, on location, and in the production offices in Manitoba. It's the employer's responsibility to ensure that necessary resources, people, cleaning supplies, non-medical protective equipment, information, and training are in place to meet the Government of Manitoba safety and health guidelines. And it's also the responsibility of the producers who have confirmed their adherence to this document to provide training to their crew members, workers, and others for these guidelines. Productions with more than 50 people working at the same time are encouraged to hire one person who represents the producer and is dedicated to communicating and enforcing the COVID-19 safety and health protocols. The COVID-19 safety and health supervisor would chair the COVID-19 safety and health committee, which is made up of representatives from each department and or team or pod, depending on the operating procedures the particular production decides to follow. Producers and other stakeholders are working to define this new role and the required training for the position. So rest assured, we're well aware of the importance of ensuring that the person who takes on this job, who is hired to dedicate their day to ensuring that these guidelines are followed and that everyone is safe, is going to be someone who is qualified. Employers must clearly define COVID-19 health and safety protocols relative to their specific production and workplace and update them regularly according to government directives. So if the government changes guidelines, we will adapt these documents to match. Employers, safety and health representatives and committees must communicate COVID-19 health and safety guidelines in written and verbal form, as well as monitor and report on implementation. It's the employer's responsibility to create an environment of trust where employees, subjects, contractors, and others may call in sick without fear of negative repercussions. If an employee, subject, or contractor is sick, they must stay home. Employers are encouraged to ensure that when an employee is well again, and if the production they leave is still operating, that their original position remains, that they are given the opportunity to return to that same position. So from my perspective on our shows, that means that if you're sick, stay home. It's okay. When you're feeling better, your job will be there for you. Whoever comes in to take over the work while you're gone will be clearly informed that they are only there on a temporary basis until you are able to return. Employees and contractors should be informed of a safe process that does not endanger their own employment or report employers, employees, and contractors who do not abide by all of the health and safety protocols at all times. Productions and production companies are encouraged to require employees and contractors to read and sign their production or workplace COVID-19 safety and health protocols document, along with the employees, contractors' initial employment agreement contract. By signing the safety and health protocols document, the employer, the employee, and the contractor all pledge to abide by the COVID-19 safety and health protocols established by the employer. Employers are encouraged to communicate with all vendors and suppliers to review their COVID-19 protocols and determine internally if these are adequate or if additional protocols are required to ensure cast and crew safety. We want to make sure whoever we're working with is at least adhering to the standards we expect on our sets, so that everyone who's on our sets, who feels the comfort level that they do, feel that same comfort level when those from away from other parts come in and work with us. It's everyone's, employers, employees, contractors, subjects, visitors' responsibility to stay informed and ensure Manitoba government COVID-19 safety and health guidelines and best practices are respected at all times. And we will do our very best to continue to update and inform everyone of any changes and be responsible to answering any questions or concerns that arise as we go through this together. This, when we polled the crew, was the most concerning comment that most people made consistently, which was their concern about our industry and how it has been for a very long time. The idea of there are no sick days in show business. Well, those times are done. Everyone needs to know if you are not feeling well, you need to stay home. You need to protect your other crew members. You need to protect the other people you work with. You need to protect the cast. You need to take care of yourself so you can get better and not get anyone else sick. And we, as the producers, need to do our best to ensure that you will be able to return to your job when you're well. Lesley?
Thanks, Kyle. Screening and testing. I get all the fun ones. Kyle gets to have all the nice ones. Everyone, producers, cast, crew, contractors, visitors, subjects, etc., must complete the shared Health Manitoba screening tool each day before reporting to work. Productions may wish to implement an additional daily COVID-19 questionnaire. This might look like every producer will do what with their production, how they feel is correct, but it may look like you filling out a questionnaire online that goes into a secure email at the production office where your name is put on a list to say, yes, you've taken that. So when you arrive at work, the person checking everybody in will know that you have indeed taken the Health Manitoba screening tool, which So productions may require that everyone have their temperature checked with a contactless thermometer prior to entering a production area at a designated checkpoint outside of the secured work area. Every producer may not decide to do this. Some producers may. It is an additional check on somebody's health. You might not know you're running a slight fever and you might just have the flu, but it's be safe rather than sorry kind of situation we're in right now. So any methods that can be employed to protect the members of the crew are something that may be employed by producers. Meals, food and more food. Providing meals on set and location must follow the applicable Manitoba government restaurant guidelines and ensure physical distancing, regular cleaning, sanitizing of common areas, including between users, and hand washing stations, and sanitizers must be provided in meal areas. So how we get our food is going to change. It's a very, it's something that every producer, along with their head of craft and caterer, will have to discuss and figure out the best approach for their particular show. Government regulations say buffet style eating is prohibitive and have suggested that snack bars and coffee bars, etc., should be closed. So with that in mind, how do we do it? But there is a way to do it. Individually packaged lunches, individually packaged craft service. So it's being talked about, it will be worked out, and everyone's just gonna have to wait and see what happens when we get to set. But food is like gas, it will happen. Dressing rooms and washroom facilities. Ensure enhanced and frequent cleaning and disinfecting of dressing rooms, and this is certainly something where they will be cleaned every night. They're cleaning.
Hi, sorry to interrupt you, Lesley. Somebody has their mic on. Can you please turn it off? Thank you.
I have my mic on. Can I turn it off?
No, you have to keep talking.
Places like the circus, etc., will be cleaned on a nightly basis. But again, here's the thing where everyone will have to take the responsibility to make sure that they're cleaning their own facility, if you will. So that if somebody is going into a dressing room, that we make sure that that dressing room is wiped down between uses. So make a disinfectant spray or wipes available for participants to disinfect dressing room surfaces before and after use. Make sure that the dressing rooms are big enough to have physical distancing. Physical distancing is 2 meters with, and if that's not observed, closer for 10 minutes, or a mask. So dressing rooms should be a big enough size to be physically distancing when it's possible. Minimizing in-person wardrobe fittings and the number of people at a wardrobe fitting. Again, all the okays by producers, directors, etc. on wardrobe can be done virtually. Encourage individuals to shower at home and limit use of dressing area, and post signage for guidance on shower area used to maintain physical distancing. Transportation. Transportation required to and from sets locations must follow applicable transportation guidelines as per the Manitoba guidelines. So we would encourage people to travel to a workplace by individual transport. All transport drivers should wear non-medical masks. It's hard to maintain physical distancing in a vehicle. I've seen a lot of work vehicles around town with that have 2 people in them to do the work, but the driver is in his driver's seat and the passenger is in the back seat of the cab on the passenger side. All production vehicles must include sanitizer, disinfectant, and must be sanitized daily and on an ongoing basis. So the driver of that vehicle needs to maintain that vehicle so that every time they pick somebody up, they're wearing their mask, the door handles, the seat belts, the window buttons, anything that they're commonly touched have been wiped. And when that person leaves that vehicle, that they're wiped again. High density transport to be used only as a last resort, and vehicle sharing should be limited. When sharing transportation, passengers should wear a non-medical mask. All passengers are responsible to clean up after themselves, any garbage, etc. We're back to Kyle.
I think it's important to remember that these are guidelines and that they are the minimums for each production, and each production will have to adapt these guidelines and in some cases enhance them based on the unique needs of each production. And while it's impossible for me to keep track of the questions as they're coming in and we're doing this presentation, there's a lot of specific questions, and I understand why people have the questions that they do. This session is about a document for everyone. It's about general guidelines and minimums. The specifics of many of your questions are going to have to be answered and can only be answered by the producers of individual productions, because everyone's going to have a different take on how to treat these specific questions and these particular scenarios. So I encourage you to ask all the questions you have of the producers you may or may not decide to work with. You need to feel safe about going back to work. And while all of these guidelines and protocols are an effort to mitigate the risk, nothing short of a vaccine will eliminate the risk. Considering that, it's important to think by way of example about unscripted, commercial work, documentary, and factual productions. Those productions are going to have different needs than other productions might, and they have different considerations than other productions might. And Miriam, can we go back to the previous slide? The same guidelines in principle apply, but you may need to apply them in these different mediums in different ways. So typically these shows have smaller crews. Well, the guidelines speak to how to deal with that. Typically these productions may have subjects on camera who aren't necessarily talent or performers. They need to be treated the same way. And those factual productions need to ensure that people who they're documenting are observing the same practices that everyone is expected to on any set. I will go to the next slide now. In particular, we need to ensure that the same appropriate safety and health protective equipment is provided to documentary crew members, commercial and factual production workers, and that all releases and paperwork, much like the other shows, should be electronic. Cast and interview subjects should be boomed when possible, and if there is a requirement to have a second microphone, which always does give better sound, we encourage those producers to have the subject mic themselves, of course with guidance and assistance, and that the microphones be cleaned before and after each use. Productions over 50 people. This is to reinforce the importance on the bigger shows of ensuring that there is someone dedicated to protecting the interests of everyone on set, and that there's a health and safety committee that is made up of representatives from each department, team, or pod, depending on the structure of your show, and that those people are able to bring the voices and concerns of all cast, crew, contractors, and others on set to the committee to be addressed with immediately. There should be no hesitation. You can't have a bad question and you can't have a bad concern. You need to bring things forward. We want everyone to feel comfortable and that they have a voice and that their voices are being heard. The health and safety committees will include a representative from the producer, and in the case of productions of 50 people or more, that will be the producer protocol enforcement supervisor. It may also include the on-set producer, the line producer, other representatives from the producer. But it will also ensure that it includes a member from every department, including the cast, and that the committee will meet on a regular basis or as required. So if there is a concern that comes up on the larger shows that can't be dealt with immediately by the protocol enforcement supervisor, a convening of the Health and Safety Committee may be needed in order to deal with the issue. But at the very minimum, on a regular basis and otherwise as required. And I want to speak now a little bit to a potential approach to how these guidelines might be interpreted on a set. And each production, as I've indicated, will take a different approach to how they enforce these guidelines and protocols and how it fits into their particular production. The team and pod approach and zone approach has already been tested and rings true. It involves having a set group of cast and crew members who work together for the run of show in designated teams or pods that may be identified by colors, will have designated holding areas and color-coded equipment and their own craft service area. This ensures that the same group of people are always working together, that they, as much as possible, do not interact with other members of the crew, and that they contain themselves to their group, share the same areas, transport, and are all together for the run of show. Further to this, within each location or studio, there should be clearly defined zones where the teams or pods will operate within a safe and secure structure. Imagine the set being designated as zone 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, with zone 1 being the set itself, zones 2 and 3 being holding and standby areas, all of which are secure. Zone 4 would be a transition zone where people are checked before they are allowed into zone 1, 2, and 3, where gear is cleaned before being allowed into zone 1, 2, and 3. And zone 5 is the outside, which includes transport, the circus, Techland, office, and the rest of the world. And each of transport, the circus, Techland, the office will have their own similar protocols to safely distance and adhere to the protocols. This slide shows what that zone might look like. Zone 1 being the set, zone 2 being the staging area where a small group of teams hold, zone 3 being a greater holding area where the rest of the teams hold, zone 4 being the so-called airlock where things are transitioned from the outside into the secure area. To help ensure the health and well-being of all of the on-screen, the On-Screen Manitoba Producers Committee encourages all productions taking place in Manitoba during the pandemic to limit shooting to 19 shooting hours plus setup and wrap time. So the 7 companies who have signed on to this so far have all agreed that our shows will not run past 11 shooting hours. I know from having produced 3 seasons of Burden of Truth, where we try to honor this on a daily basis on that show, that so many of the crew have given us feedback saying that because of our adherence to the 11 hours, it has been a much easier show for them to work on than others. It's the law of diminishing return. Once you work past a certain point, people are no longer effective. It is no longer healthy for their well-being. We need to ensure that people are strong, well-rested, and safe, and limiting the production hours to 11 shooting hours and adhering to that for every production in Manitoba is going to go a long way towards that goal. Here are a list of the companies that have so far endorsed this guide and pledged to adhere to it. As I said before, I encourage all production companies in Manitoba to join us. Reach out to On-Screen Manitoba. I'd love to see all of your names on here. And I would hope that any production companies coming from away will, at a minimum, honor these guidelines on their productions. On Screen Manitoba, go ahead, Lesley.
So On Screen Manitoba and Film Training Manitoba are working with industry stakeholders on ensuring that appropriate training is made available to all Manitoba cast, crew, and contractors. Communication about courses and workshops is forthcoming. We all need to educate ourselves through Film Training Manitoba, using online resources to start thinking about how do we personally implement social distancing, hand washing, cleaning equipment, how we react to things on set, how things are going to work. What is a good exercise is take yourself through your day and figure out where might there be a problem? Where should I speak to the producer and say, how are we going to work this out? Every key should be thinking about how their department will work through a day on set. I think this is a fabulous first step, and it's, I know personally, if I production and manage another show, I will want to be asking my keys, how do we implement this in your department? And I think that's your homework. How do we implement all of this in each of your departments so that the film industry opens and stays open? Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and just to further what Lesley just said, this is a starting place. We've tried really hard to give us a good place to start from. And now it's over to all of you to work with all of us so that we can figure out how all of this is going to happen in a way that first and foremost keeps us safe, but also to figure out the best practices for us. We're unique here. Let's find the best way for all of us to work together in a safe way that still gets things done, that we can feel proud about our work, and that we can feel good about going to work and then going home to our families in a safe way. Thanks all of you for tuning in and listening to this, I can only imagine, fairly boring presentation, but we really appreciate that you're paying attention and listening. Thank you.
I was riveted, Kyle, from beginning to end. That was amazing. Thank you. Great production. Thank you so very much to Kyle and Lesley for working on this. And I want to give a special shout out to Callie and Mariam, who they all worked to pull this together. You know, like Kyle said, his group has been meeting for the past 6 weeks. Everyone's groups have been meeting ever since, you know, everything began and how we were going to be able to get through this. And, you know, I have to say a lot of the questions have already been answered in the presentation. And I know also that you're likely going to go away and think of other ones, but I want to pick a few that have come through that while we did address them, they're very good, and it just helps drive home certain points. You know what? It's not just up to the producer. It's not just up to your union. It's up to you to keep your hands clean, to wipe things down, and you know, specifically, location has a very important job to do. That is true. They do the beginning, they do the end, they do the middle, but all the in between is all you. And we're not going to get through this unless you're willing to do that. You'll be putting yourself at risk, your coworkers, your cast, your families at risk. So please, if you're just, you know, sitting on your Apple box, as some are want to do sometimes, maybe take a minute to wipe something down. So a couple of the questions I had that were, oh, you're gonna have to excuse me, I'm trying to operate off my phone too. Was the questions for extras. How are we going to keep background extras separate? And I'd like to address this question to Kyle, because of course we did talk and we've seen lots of documentation on when, like, those scenes, those rock concert scenes are not happening anytime soon. Like, you just cannot have that many people together in a room. So I'll give Kyle the opportunity to maybe address that one.
Yeah, I think that this is an important question to answer, certainly. And I'll give you Eagle Vision's approach to this. So every company might be different, but the way we're already addressing these kinds of situations is with the writers. So first and foremost, we're asking our writing team to think about the guidelines and to not put us in a predicament where we are going to have that kind of situation where we can't have background who are safe distances from each other. And the same comes to our directors and having conversations with them about understanding that, you know, we may, and well, we won't be able to do things the way we always have, and that they're going to have to be accommodating to the protocols and safety measures first. I think that there's a lot of concern about how we're going to do some of the intimacy and close interaction with actors. And frankly, that's going to be on a production by production basis, depending on the level of comfort of the performers. And really, it's going to be, at the end of the day, very much up to them. We're not going to pick locations that aren't conducive to allowing background to distance. We aren't going to pick locations that aren't conducive to allowing social distancing for our crews. So we're going to identify to our location scouts, to our directors, and to those making decisions on our locations that they need to pick places that suit the material, but are also safe for our operations.
Thank you very much, Kyle. There was a few questions about messaging and who's responsible for getting the messaging out, and also there was also a separate question regarding who can people send some of their suggestions to. So I'm going to let Nicole from On Screen Manitoba answer that question.
Hi. Am I unmuted?
I can hear you, Nicole.
Okay. I don't know what's going on with the video. It doesn't matter. I just, wanted to pick up on the piece about messaging to the public. And I think it's really important that we communicate to the public that, as we do to everyone else, that our goal is to go back to work in the safest way possible. So On Screen Manitoba has already been thinking about this and starting to put together a little bit of a communications plan. And this is something that we'll be discussing further with the Manitoba Media Production Industry Working Group, because it will take all stakeholders working together to ensure that we get clear messaging out about safety in our industry. So thank you for that question. And yes, we're working towards it. If people have ideas or suggestions, On Screen Manitoba is very happy to take those. You can reach out to me, Nicole, at onscreenmanitoba.com, or speak with Callie or with Mariam. We're all very happy to take your ideas, and they will be put together and again shared with the OSM Producer Committee, as well as with the Media Production Industry Working Group. You, of course, may reach out to your unions. I know that all of the business agents are actively meeting with their membership to ensure that there is opportunity for everyone to contribute, because it is really by working together that we are going to ensure a safe return to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next question is the sanitation workplace measures now required is a new responsibility that does not fall within pre-COVID job descriptions. Can you please clarify the steps productions will be taken to engage sanitation personnel who have the required skill set to perform this important responsibility? If anyone wants to take that, or I can absolutely take that. you know, some of the messaging that we've been delivering, the clear message we've been delivering, it is up to production to provide you with the tools you need to do your job. In addition, for sanitation, it is up to everyone on that set to be helping out and whoop, oh, time's done, bye, just kidding. It's everybody's responsibility to help maintain that. But it's the employer's responsibility to provide the means and the funds necessary to be able to have that happen. And if anyone has anything they want to add to that, please feel free from anyone on our committees. Nope. Okay. I think that is that, unless somebody else has a very burning question. There have been a lot of questions that have been happening along in the Zoom group chat, and they have they've either been answered. I saw that Claude Foray had answered an insurance question put forth, and a lot of stuff is being answered as we go. Just excuse me as I read these things that keep popping up here. So somebody has a question regarding what is the definition of sick and how do you know that you're sick? The province clearly outlines some of the important symptoms to watch out for. And all of us groups are following the provincial guidelines that are being set out by Dr. Rusin. I believe there was another question about the science and who has been advising this particular group. Again, Rachel might be able to speak to it from Manitoba Film Music a little more clearly, as she has access to Dr. Rusin, who has been a great friend to the film industry and great for advising us. Rachel, did you want to add anything?
Sure. When we started this project through both the Minister of Culture and Minister of Health, put me right through to Dr. Rusin, and he was giving us particular guidelines in terms of what they were looking for. And so as you all know and the producer committee knows, government was not looking to be prescriptive of what the exact guidelines are, just minimum health standards to be met for us to then go and take and develop this report. As questions and issues arose, I did have that direct portal to go back and take producer committee questions right to Dr. Rusin for direction and answer, and that still exists there. And so the producer committee knows that since we were asked at Manitoba Film and Music to be the ones to take this to Dr. Rusin directly, that should any questions come around, please direct those to me or through Nicole to me, either which way. We will take those to be answered and brought back in real time with you. We found that process worked very well and we'll continue with that. And I'm just very grateful that we have that kind of access to get those particular questions answered. Government recognizes that our industry is very different because it encompasses so many different areas and sectors within one. So we are food, we are beverage, we are aesthetics, we are hair, we are everything all together, and never mind what we're doing on set in addition to that to shoot a movie or a TV show. And so as those questions arise, we'll continue to get more and more direction directly from him.
Thank you very much, Rachel. So further to the, somebody comes in and they have a cough or they're sneezing. Now, for me, for example, I have seasonal allergies really, really badly. If we're working somewhere, say, for example, like the other side of Erin, I'm going to be sneezing a lot more than I normally would. I think that people need to use their best judgment on whether or not this is actually possibly COVID. If there's any doubt, I would suggest do not go into work at all. One of the other questions was, do we get paid if we call in sick? I don't know what your union agreements hold at this current time. So I don't know if, I don't know the answer to that. I do know, I feel like it was the federal government who's looking into 10 sick days for everybody. Another question is these guidelines, that have been presented, have they been okayed by the province and Dr. Rusin? And again, I refer to Rachel. I think you're on mute, Rachel. I'll answer for Rachel and hopefully I answer correctly. Yes.
Oh, sorry, I froze. I'm here.
Okay.
Got you. Can you repeat that? I had a freezing moment here on my computer.
Sure. So someone had asked if the guidelines have been presented today have been okayed by the province and Dr. Rusin.
The guidelines meaning what this committee has just reviewed now?
Yeah.
They were not sent to the province. They are, as long as they are consistent and supplemental to the guidelines that were posted, they're totally understanding and fine with the fact whether our industry wants to develop one set of guidelines or whether each employer wants to develop their own. They're not mandating one way of doing it. They're just saying that when this industry reopens and when producers are on set, each employer is responsible for ensuring adherence. If it looks a little different between employers, that was okay. It's just the concept of these minimum guidelines had to be fulfilled.
Thank you, Rachel. You know, I think for everyone, even outside the film industry, there's a really big concern of knowing the difference between, oh my God, is this COVID? Or is this just a cold or allergies? Someone suggested as well to give Health Links a call. They go through an interview process with you. And, you know, it's not just you you're trying to protect, it's your families and it's also your coworkers. And we just try and use as much common sense and operate within all the information that we have access to right now to be able to go into work and such. Kyle, did you want to address some of the back to the science question a little bit about the masks and the masks for the frontline health workers versus the masks that we can wear on set that will be able to allow us to work together if people decide to wear masks to work, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, we're still being advised that we shouldn't be using so-called formal PPE, and that's a term that's, I guess, designated to hospital-grade protective equipment. We are, however, being greatly advised to use appropriate safety and health protective equipment. And a study came out of the US today that was done in conjunction with several universities, and it has now been scientifically proven that by wearing a protective mask, that you reduce the chance of spread by 80%. And so that is a significant amount. And that for each 1 meter of distance there is, you decrease the risk by an additional 50%. So these things that we're implementing are starting to be proven to be effective. And I mean, I can't enforce it enough that these are all mitigation are procedures to mitigate the risk, not eliminate the risk. There's no way of stopping this thing, but we can do everything in our power to prevent it. And that's what we should be doing. And I do want to say something about the guidelines and the question around the government regulations.
Yep.
So the reason you see these 7 companies signing on to a pledge to enforce these guidelines was that we, as the Producers Caucus in Manitoba, did not feel that the government guidelines went far enough to protect our industry as a whole. So we wanted to take it a step further. And we fully appreciate and understand that the government can't be very prescriptive about these things, that they can only go so far with the guidelines, in particular because they, by default, by making the guidelines, have to enforce them. And so we undertook to ensure that a level of guidelines and protocols that was more suited to our set of standards was what we all pledged to be part of and to enforce on our shows. So I just want to make sure that that's clearly understood, that that's why we've signed on to this. We want to do more than is required because we feel that's important.
And I also want to clarify even further to Kyle's statement, is that with each sector that is being presented with guidelines, the construction industry, physiotherapy, massage, hairdressers, all those groups are coming up with additional guidelines to help protect their employees and their clients. So this is not something just for the film industry where you're probably feeling like, I'm not getting any answers. But every industry has to take a look at what risk they want to have. And I applaud the Producers Caucus, and I applaud the unions, and I applaud the Producers Committee for being forward thinking and looking at what we can do to protect ourselves.
Monique, can I add to that?
100%.
I was just going to add that when I had a conversation with Minister Friesen after these guidelines came up, he talked about the fact that we as an industry, he hoped that we would recognize that this was a government that really believed in how we as an industry operate with logistics and how thorough we are. And so as a result of the documents that I submitted on behalf of the Producer Committee for their original proposal to government that caused these guidelines to be extrapolated from that, government decided to be permissive versus restrictive. And it's exactly what Monique said. This is happening all throughout every sector and industry, not just ours. Government does not and will not say, do it this way. They're just going to say, this is the minimum threshold, maintain social distance when reasonably required other than brief exchanges. And how we go about do that is up to us as an industry. And so better that we do this exercise that's been happening right here with the Producer Committee, determining how to put those belt and suspenders on, because it's not for government to tell us how to clean or how to operate on set and how to do the work. They just want to make sure that we as an industry, like every other industry, understand the minimum public safety guidelines for us to have doors open, and then the rest is up to us. So it was a vote of confidence that they decided to be permissive versus restrictive that way. And again, I commend the Producer Committee for being more detailed with it, but it's up to all employers can determine other or additional protocols for them. It doesn't have to be a one size fits all as long as those minimum safety guidelines are followed.
Thank you, Rachel. So, Kate, we're gonna start wrapping up. So basically the three sort of takeaways that I want you to kind of think about is number one, if you're a producer and you want to get in on what's the word I'm looking for, comforting the crew that you're on board with these guidelines, please get in contact with On Screen Manitoba so that we can add you to the commitment list, which will also be available, I believe, on Screen Manitoba's site, so that you as a crew can check and see if you're comfortable with the guidelines that are being presented to you. On Screen Manitoba membership, as I mentioned earlier, On Screen Manitoba is an industry association. It's not just for producers, it's not just for service suppliers, it's not just for the unions, it's for everybody. Please check it out and maybe consider being a member. And also, it's your place to keep up on the ever-changing information. And last but not least, because this is seems to be the biggest hope, is that who is responsible for cleaning and who is not responsible for cleaning. There obviously there'll be protocols set forth by the employer because it's their job to do so. However, we are all in this together, to quote somebody at the province, and we need to be able to help each other out and maybe do a little more than what we normally do. So in saying that, I want to thank all the presenters, so Kyle and Lesley. I want to thank the members of the Manitoba Media Industry Work Group. I want to thank the staff and Nicole Maciation from On Screen Manitoba. I want to thank MFM for all their support, City of Winnipeg, of course, And just know that we're stronger together, and you can show your support by taking out a membership to the organization. And I'm gonna bat it back to Nicole.
Thanks, Monique.
Hi, thanks, Monique, for moderating this session. And thank you once again to all of the contributors, to the guide, to the presenters today, and to everyone for being here and listening. Merci à tout le monde. Nous reconnaissons qu'il y a un nombre montant de professionnels qui travaillent en français ici au Manitoba. Nous allons pouvoir partager ce guide et d'autres ressources en français dans les semaines à venir. We're going to be sharing this guide in French and in English, along with other resources as we continue to develop them in the coming weeks. We will also be providing information about training sessions as we complete planning with FTM and the other stakeholder organizations. And as mentioned earlier, we will be sending out a follow-up message I think early next week, so that we have time to respond to everybody's questions and provide you with a recording of this session along with the PowerPoint and the updated guide. So once again, thank you to everyone. Special thank you to Monique. Grand merci au personnel de Screen Manitoba. And we look forward to continuing the conversation with everyone as production starts up once again.